On July 6, 2022, a chilling call came from Shanda Vander Ark in Norton Shores, Michigan. Her son Timothy was unresponsive. First responders expected a medical emergency, but what they found was far worse. Timothy, just 15, was discovered lifeless in a small dark closet, emaciated, weighing only 69 pounds. The signs of prolonged starvation and neglect were unmistakable. This was not a sudden tragedy, but the result of sustained cruelty. The house, outwardly ordinary, concealed months of suffering. Investigators quickly realized the stories from Shanda and her older son, Paul, didn't add up. Evidence in the home told a story of deliberate abuse. Neighbors were shocked as news spread. How could such horror happen in their quiet community? The case forced everyone to confront the darkness that can exist behind closed doors. How could a child be starved to death by his own family? The tragedy of Timothy Ferguson became a national wake-up call. It raised urgent questions about family, responsibility, and the systems meant to protect children. The discovery was only the beginning of a harrowing story of cruelty and loss. The Carroway Street home looked like any other, neat, suburban, unremarkable. But inside, the illusion of normalcy vanished. The basement was Timothy's world, cold, bare, and devoid of comfort. No bed, just a concrete floor and a plastic chair. A cell, not a bedroom. Locks on the closet door and pantry revealed a system of imprisonment and starvation. Surveillance cameras weren't for security, they were for control. Shanda and Paul monitored Timothy's every move, even from their phones. The house was an instrument of torture, its ordinary facade hiding calculated abuse. Investigators documented every detail, each one more horrifying than the last. The case proved that unimaginable cruelty can hide in plain sight behind the most familiar doors. The true horror was not in the darkness but in the everyday. At the center was Shanda Vander Ark, a mother whose public mask hid a capacity for cruelty. She orchestrated Timothy's suffering, with her older son Paul as her willing accomplice. Paul, 20, enforced his mother's rules, restraining Timothy and administering punishments. Instead of protecting his brother, he became another tormentor. Timothy, just 15, was a vulnerable child with special needs, developmental delays and autism. He depended entirely on his mother for care and safety, a dependence that was exploited. His gentle nature was met with violence and contempt. The family dynamic was toxic. Shanda commanded, Paul enforced, and Timothy suffered. Isolated and powerless, Timothy had no escape. The people who should have protected him became his abusers. This was not neglect. It was a systematic destruction of a child's life. The tragedy was compounded by the betrayal of trust and the collapse of family bonds. Timothy's story is a devastating reminder of how those closest can inflict the deepest wounds. His suffering was hidden, his voice silenced by those meant to love him. The cruelty was deliberate, the pain relentless. Timothy deserved so much more. Timothy's isolation was key to his suffering. Shanda homeschooled him, removing him from teachers and counselors who might have noticed abuse. Homeschooling became a tool for control, not education. Timothy's world shrank to the basement. No friends, no visitors, no outside contact. He was completely cut off, dependent on his abusers for everything. This isolation made resistance impossible and escape unthinkable. Neighbors rarely saw Timothy. Excuses about his absence went unquestioned. The family's quiet, private life deflected suspicion. The community's respect for privacy became a shield for abuse. Timothy was made invisible, a ghost in his own home. His isolation was as much a weapon as any lock or chain. The tragedy highlights the dangers of unchecked isolation and the need for community vigilance. For Timothy, being hidden meant no one heard his silent cries for help. The basement was Timothy's prison, a place designed for suffering. He slept on cold concrete, often in wet clothes after punitive ice baths. The room was filthy, reeking of urine, with no access to a bathroom. This was dehumanization, stripping him of dignity and hope. The small closet was his cell, locked for hours or days in darkness. Sensory deprivation and fear became his constant companions. Surveillance cameras ensured he had no privacy, no peace. Every moment was monitored, every action controlled. The environment was engineered to break his spirit and body. The basement was not neglect, it was calculated torment. Timothy's suffering was both physical and psychological. It was a place where hope could not survive. Timothy's abuse was systematic and sadistic. Starvation was the main weapon. He was given only scraps, while Shanda and Paul ate normally. His body wasted away, consumed by hunger. Ice-cold baths were used as punishment, sometimes with Timothy bound by zip ties. The pain and danger were immense, especially for a starving child. Hot sauce was forced on him, burning his mouth and stomach. Texts between Shanda and Paul revealed their casual cruelty. Timothy was forced to stand for hours, perform exhausting exercises, and endure constant verbal abuse. Every punishment was deliberate. Every act meant to break him. The abuse was not a loss of control. It was planned and executed with chilling intent. Timothy's life became a nightmare of pain, fear, and humiliation. The methods were creative in their cruelty, leaving no escape. This was torture, not discipline. The legal reckoning began with Paul Ferguson. In December 2023, he pled guilty to first-degree child abuse and agreed to testify against his mother. His testimony detailed the timeline methods and Shanda's central role. Paul was sentenced to 30 to 100 years in prison. The court recognized his active participation and failure to protect Timothy. Shanda's trial followed in early 2024. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. First responders' testimony, disturbing texts, and surveillance footage. Photos of Timothy's emaciated body shocked the jury. Paul's testimony described the punishments and his mother's satisfaction in Timothy's suffering. The trial exposed the full scope of the abuse, leaving no doubt about Shanda's guilt. The community and nation were horrified as the details emerged. The jury took just over an hour to find Shanda guilty of felony murder and first-degree child abuse. Throughout the trial, she showed little emotion, her coldness unsettling all who watched. At sentencing, Judge Kevin Elsenheimer called her actions the worst I've ever seen. He condemned her for obliterating Timothy's life and dignity. Shanda received life in prison without parole, plus 50 to 100 years for child abuse. As the sentence was read, her facade finally cracked. She wept, but for herself, not her son. The sentence brought legal closure, but could not erase Timothy's suffering. Justice was served, but the scars remained. The case ended in court, but its impact would linger. The community was left to grapple with the tragedy and its lessons. Timothy Ferguson's case leaves haunting questions. How could such evil hide in plain sight? The tragedy is a stark reminder. Abuse can thrive behind closed doors, masked by normalcy. Vigilance is critical. Neighbors, friends, and family are the first line of defense. Timothy's absence from public life was a red flag ignored. The system failed him. Homeschooling created a dangerous blind spot. We must balance parental rights with child safety, ensuring no child disappears from view. Timothy's story is a call to action: foster communities that look out for one another and support child protection. We must never forget the boy starved of love and hope. His memory is a warning, a reminder of our duty to protect the vulnerable.